Bonjour, and welcome to Fabulously Delicious, the longest running French food podcast in English. I'm Andrew Pryor, former MasterChef Australia contestant, French food author, and your guide to the stories, flavours, and culture behind France's most iconic dishes. From Parisian classics to regional hidden gems, this is where French food gets deliciously real. In today's episode, we're stepping back in time to the bustling streets of Paris to listen to the Cris de Paris, the lively, poetic, and sometimes cheeky cries of market vendors that brought the city's food to life. Before Paris had neon signs, shop windows, or social media, it had voices, loud, lyrical, musical voices echoing through its streets. The Cris de Paris, or the cries of Paris, were the shouted calls of the street sellers and market vendors from the Middle Ages through to the Renaissance, advertising everything from fresh milk and warm bread to oysters, cherries, and roasted chestnuts. These weren't just sales pitches, they were street poetry, marketing jingles, and the soundtrack of everyday Parisian life. Each cry tells us what people ate, what they craved, and how the city sounded centuries ago. And later in this episode, we'll dive into some of the most mouth-watering food-related cries, from fishmongers to basket weavers, so you can hear exactly how Paris once tempted hungry passers-by. It all started with the street vendors of Paris in the Middle Ages, who would call out their wares to anyone passing by, from fresh milk and bread to fruits and vegetables and small household goods. At first, these calls were simple announcements, practical, functional, and meant purely to attract attention. But over time, vendors realized that the more memorable and entertaining their cries were, the more likely they were to catch a customer's ear and sell their goods. Creativity crept in. Cries became rhythmic, sometimes rhymed, full of exaggeration, humor, or clever wordplay. As this style of calling evolved, auctioneers and traveling merchants began to adopt the same techniques, mimicking the energetic theatrical style of the market sellers. Gradually, these cries weren't just a way to sell products, they became a ubiquitous part of Parisian streets, cultural tradition, and eventually a recognizable feature of markets and city life across France. By the 16th century, the Cris de Paris were more than just sales calls. They were performances, poetry in motion, and the unmistakable soundtrack of a bustling city. The popularity of these cries spread beyond market stalls. Auctioneers and travelling merchants adopted the same lively style, turning the cries into an established feature of Parisian street life. By the 16th century, the Cris de Paris had become both a form of street advertising and a kind of performance art, an oral soundtrack of everyday city life, capturing the rhythm, energy, and taste of Paris. The Cris de Paris didn't just happen everywhere. They thrived where the city's life was more concentrated. Markets were the heart of the Cris, particularly the famous Les Halles, which by the 13th century had become Paris's central food market. Here, merchants and vendors sold everything from fish to vegetables to baked goods, and the bustling environment demanded loud, attention grabbing calls. Les Halles was called the belly of Paris. Established in the 12th century and expanding through the Middle Ages, it became a bustling hub where farmers, fishmongers, bakers, and countless other vendors brought their goods into the city. The cries of the sellers filled the covered market and surrounding streets, creating a lively, almost musical backdrop to daily life. But as Paris modernized in the 18th and 19th centuries, the traditional cries gradually disappeared. Regulations, stricter market organization, and the rise of fixed shops and street signage reduced the need for loud performative calls. By the time Laos was rebuilt in the 1850s into the iron and glass pavilion designed by Victor Boltard, the Cris de Paris had largely faded, surviving only in literary collections, prints, and music, leaving us with a fascinating echo of a city that once spoke and sang through its markets. Other locations included the Grand Boulevards and major thoroughfares where tradespeople could reach passing shoppers and pedestrians. Streets near the Pont de Neuf in the Ile-de-la-City were especially lively. Bridges and squares became performance spaces of sorts, as vendors called out their wares to anyone crossing. Even smaller neighbourhood markets, like those in the Marais or near the Rue Saint-Honoré, developed their own traditional local cries. Historical references in prints, literacy sources, and municipal records sometimes note these specific locations, giving us a snapshot of where Parisians shopped, socialised, and listened to the city's living soundtrack. Over time, the cries weren't confined to any one street. They became a familiar feature across Paris and eventually in towns throughout France, shaping how people experienced urban life. We know about them today thanks to a fascinating range of surviving sources, from poetry to satirical collections, recorded and stylized the calls, sometimes exaggerating them for comic effect. And composers, most famously Clément Janequin, even turned the cries into polyphonic music, capturing the overlapping, bustling sounds of the city in song. Together, these sources give us a rich picture of how Paris sounded, ate, and lived centuries ago. A quick pause, fabulous listeners. Want even more French deliciousness? Join my fabulously delicious Substack where I share exclusive food finds, restaurant tips, and behind the scenes podcast extras, very French stories that you won't hear on the show. You can subscribe for free or go paid to unlock extra indulgence and help support this podcast. Merci beaucoup. Find the link in the show notes or visit andrewpryorfabulously.com for more details. If this podcast brings a little French joy into your life, you can support it directly via the link in the show notes for this episode. Your contribution helps keep Fabulously Delicious independent and fuels future episodes, food adventures, and delicious research. Merci infiniment. Your support means the world. Clément is considered one of the greatest French composers of the first half of the 16th century, and he left a remarkable legacy of more than 400 works. Whilst most of his compositions were religious, masses, and sacred songs, he is equally celebrated for his secular pieces, especially those that captured the sounds of everyday life. Among these, his Cris de Paris stands out as an vivid musical snapshot of Parisian street life, bringing to life the calls of vendors, the rhythm of the markets, and the energy of the city. Beyond the Cris de Paris, Clermont composed a variety of other programmatic pieces that depicted sounds and events in equally imaginative ways. The lark, the song of the birds, the hunt, the war, the battle of Marjan, the capture of Boulogne, the war of Renty, Music Lard, the battle of Metz, the women's caquet, and the nightingale. These works, full of vivid sound imagery, continue to be performed today, and his composition, Le Guerre, even found its way onto the soundtrack of Gus Van Sant's film, Last Days. The Cris de Paris were not only preserved in music but also in visual art. One of the most famous French engravings from the 18th century was created by Jacques Chiquet, a prolific engraver known for his folk-themed works depicting everyday life. His Cris de Paris engravings capture the bustling streets and the diverse array of vendors, from fruit sellers to fishmongers, each shouting their wares. These engravings were widely reproduced and sold as prints on paper, becoming a popular way for Parisians and later collectors to remember the lively street scenes and the unique culture of the markets. Together, Genequin's music and Chiquet's visual records give us a remarkable window into how Paris once sounded, smelled, and moved, setting the stage for the rich, vibrant cries we're about to explore. And now, let's wander into the bustling streets of Paris and listen to the city's mouth-watering soundtrack, the food-related Cris de Paris. These weren't just calls to buy, they were performances, little bursts of poetry and theatre designed to grab your attention and tempt your taste buds. Picture this. Imagine yourself weaving through a crowded market in the 16th century. The smells of roasted chestnuts and citrus in the air. The chatter of shoppers mixing with the cries of sellers. This is what Paris sounded like. Take, for example, the cry of the coconut merchant. Coco, coco, coco frais, qui vaut du coco? Which translates to cocoa, coconut, fresh coconut. Who wants coconut? At first, you might think he was selling, well, coconuts, but in reality, he was offering a refreshing drink, a kind of herbal tea made by macerating licorice sticks into lemon water and serving it in coconut shells. This clever twist gave the drink its name, and it became a popular refreshment in France and Belgium all the way into the 20th century. These merchants had other cries too. À la fraîche, qui veut boire? À la fraîche, qui veut boire? Du coup, pour vouloir. Calling attention not just to the drink, but to the price, with a loi being the official currency of France at the time. Tin sellers had their own signature call. Étain, étain, les beaux autans. Pour boire, pour voir, les beaux autans. Which in English translates to tin, tin, beautiful tin. To drink, to see, the beautiful tins. In the 16th century, glassware was expensive and largely reserved for the upper class. The bourgeois and the middle classes turned to tin for their plates, cups, and decorative utensils. The tinsmiths or étamers would even visit customers' homes to tin their pots and pans, often calling out, étameur, pour vos pois, pour vos casseroles, which advertised that not just the product, but the service itself. Some cries have survived in sound even today. Roasted chestnuts, for instance, were famously shouted as marron, marron, chaud les marrons, chaud, or, in English, chestnuts, chestnuts, hot chestnuts, hot. A cry you can still hear on the streets of Paris during winter. Oranges, meanwhile, were rare and expensive in the 17th century, reserved for special occasions, and their sellers would call orange, orange, qui vaut mes belles oranges? Oranges, oranges. Who wants my beautiful oranges? I've never heard that. Tempting customers with the exotic fruit that would later become part of festive traditions like weddings and Christmases. Even baked goods had their own voices. The oublies, a type of large, round, donut-like bread, had a variety of cries depending on the region. In Marseille, vendors would shout, Marchands de oubli, oubli à la joie. In English, merchants of forget about joy. During the Restoration period, this evolved to include political flourishes. Marchand d'oubli, vive Louis, oubli à la joie. Vive le roi, which translates to merchant of forget. Long live Louis. Forget the joy. Long live Louis. And later, under Napoleon III, the cries transformed entirely into something more, well, celebratory. Voilà la poésie, messieurs. Voilà la poésie, mesdames. Regalez-vous, inviting everybody to enjoy the treat. While vegetable sellers shouted, Navette carotte, ho ho, reminding shoppers that even humble turnips and carrots had their place in Parisian kitchens. Each cry, whether for a refreshing drink, a roasted chestnut, a precious orange, or a simple basket, tells us not only what people ate, but how they experienced the city through sound, smell, and the joyful rhythm of everyday life. And together, they form a fascinating, almost theatrical snapshot of Paris as it once was. Vibrant, bustling, and alive with the music of commerce. So next time you stroll through a Paris market, close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. The chestnuts popping, the oranges shining, the tin clinking, and a chorus of vendors calling, singing, and shouting their wares. The Cris de Paris may be centuries old, but their spirit is still alive, reminding us that food, music, and a little bit of theatre are at the heart of Parisian life, one mouth-watering, unforgettable cry at a time. Want more fabulously delicious in between episodes? Hmm. Well, you can follow me at Andrew Pryor Fabulously on Instagram, Threads, and at Fab French Foodie on Blue Sky for bite-sized French food history, delicious facts, behind-the-scenes moments, plenty of life in France flavour. And if you want to watch this podcast, not just listen, you can find the full video episodes on YouTube. More food, more stories, more fabulousness. Come, join the party. It's très scrollable. Et voila. That's the end of today's episode of Fabulously Delicious. If this episode made you, well, hungry, happy, or suddenly Googling flights to France, perfect. If you enjoyed it, leave a review, share it with a fellow food lover, and come say bonjour. I always love hearing from you. And if you like this episode of The Cries of Paris, be sure to check out similar episodes on French food culture, like the episode on champagne. And also, there's one on chocolate in France. Just search for them on the podcast platform that you're using. There's plenty more deliciousness awaiting. Until next time, eat well, stay curious, and remember, life is better with butter. And as I always say, whatever you do it fabulously. Merci beaucoup and bon app. Et à très bientôt.